Okay, so to start, let's start with North Korea testing a device earlier this week. How do you think we should be handling North Korea, and what do you think this recent launch means for our situation with them?
I think it means it's a very dangerous move. The fourth time they have done this in violation of an agreement that we made. One of the keys to it is China. China continues to prop them up, but it's dangerous, and they can have the capability of launching a missile that can reach the United States of America, which means we're going to have to install a thing called THAAD, which is a missile defense system, hopefully in South Korea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think we've seen diplomacy has failed with North Korea, sanctions have failed with North Korea. China has the unique capability to put enormous pressure on that regime because of the economic assistance and fuel oil that China supplies. But for the past 10 years, really, we have not engaged China to apply that pressure. And now this threat is not just in Northeast Asia, but I think there's a very real concern that North Korea has been cooperating with Iran, both on the development of nuclear weapons and on the development of ballistic missiles. So as we see Iran now begin to get the benefits of the Vienna deal on its nuclear weapons program, I think this threat really is spreading, and that we're going to risk an increase in the proliferation of nuclear weapons worldwide unless we get a tougher policy.
Can I say I'm very happy to have Ambassador John Bolton here with me in the Valley. He's probably the most articulate and informed individual on national security that I know, and glad to have him here and on 15 to educate our viewers.
And speaking of national security and kind of taking that broader view, there's so many international issues happening right now. We have North Korea, there's Saudi Arabia and Iran, the Syrian refugee crisis. In your opinions, what do you think is the biggest threat to the U.S. right now, and what steps should we be taking to try and thwart that threat?
Well, I think the immediate threat is the proliferation of nuclear weapons. I think the deal that the president negotiated with Iran effectively legitimizes both the regime and its nuclear weapons program. It's going to give them benefits in the unfreezing of tens of billions of dollars of assets, the lifting of economic sanctions, not adequate verification of what Iran will be doing in the coming years. And it's really already launched a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, the Saudis, the Egyptians, the Turks, and others, which threaten stability there, the production of oil on a global basis, our friends in Israel. So it has direct implications from us. But really, there's an issue, I think, that we need to consider in the 2016 election. I think that's why national security should be the #1 issue. It's why I'm here to help Senator McCain out as the leading spokesman in the Senate for a strong national security policy.
And Senator, on that terrorism front, bringing it back home here to Arizona, it's something that hits close to home for us here. We have the loss of Kayla Mueller. Jim Foley spent some time here in Arizona. Also, the other side of that, the men involved in the Garland, Texas attacks, one of the men recently arrested in California, the Iraqi refugee who is now facing charges of supporting terrorism. He spent time in Arizona. Why do you think we're seeing this activity here in our state, and what can we do to try to keep us safer?
I think that a lot of it has to do with the attractiveness of Arizona to come here for a variety of reasons, but I don't think there's any doubt there will be more attacks on the United States of America as long as ISIS has this base in Raqqa. We've seen on ABC earlier this factory now that they have developed in Raqqa to make more weapons. That's where they train people to go out and commit attacks. So, and by the way, Russia continues to commit aggression in Ukraine, and then very aggressive in the region. And of course, we have these cyber attacks. So I would argue that we probably have a more multiple set of threats to our security than any time since the World War II.
Now, I think the real issue here is what America's proper place in the world is to protect ourselves, to protect our people here at home, to protect our friends and allies around the world. And I think that it's clear that when America operates from a position of strength, it deters adversaries from doing things that threaten us. Right now, nobody is deterred by the United States. That's why Russia is being aggressive in Ukraine and Eastern and Central Europe, China in the South China Sea. ISIS and Al-Qaeda have revived and expanded. And the threat really here in the United States is growing. As long as ISIS in particular can communicate over the internet, There's no such thing as a lone wolf terrorist. These people are part of a larger network. It's much more sophisticated than we've dealt with before. So I think both here and as we saw the attacks in Paris and Western Europe, we're in really grave danger if, as Senator McCain says, we allow that sanctuary that ISIS now holds to remain.
And with you know, the attacks in Paris in mind, those recent arrests I just mentioned, has your thoughts on the Syrian refugee crisis and allowing refugees in, has that changed at all? I know that you've said in the past that you don't necessarily think all refugees should be kept out of the U.S., but what's your thought on that at this time?
My thought is we should have a short-term pause at least to examine all avenues that people use to come into this country. The San Bernardino couple, it was through a fiancé visa program. So we have to look at every aspect of it. There are Christians that are in danger of losing their lives right now in the Middle East. Obviously, we should want to provide some sanctuary for them. But at the same time, I am sure that Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, is telling young men to join the refugee flow, get to the United States, and commit an act of terror. So our first requirement is national security, and that means putting things on hold until we can sort all this out.
And national security, as you mentioned, obviously a huge concern and a big topic for so many right now. But also gun control is another big topic right now. You know, it's now been 5 years since the mass shooting in Tucson. Your thoughts on the president's executive actions on gun control recently?
Well, I think we should have significant background checks. We don't want, no one wants weapons to fall into the hands of people who might commit crimes. But at the same time, all of us recoil at the president abusing his constitutional oath, and that is by issuing executive orders which are clearly unconstitutional. And so what he really does is make people who are members of Congress less likely to work with him. And by the way, in the short term, gun sales have skyrocketed. So the president, rather than sitting down with us, and we're for increased background checks, we also for trying to identify people who clearly manifest mental instability long before they commit these crimes. Every one of the persons who has committed these has shown instability and mental illness before they did it. So that's where we ought to focus our attention, and at the same time tell the president, rather than acting in an unconstitutional fashion, sit down and talk to members of Congress.
What would you have done differently had you been president during Tucson, Aurora?
I think I would have put enormous emphasis on identifying people with mental illness. As I said, that to me is the first thing. Do we want adequate background checks? Sure, we all do, because we don't want the guns to fall in the hands of criminal. But I can tell you what I would have done is I would have called, as other presidents have, I would have called over Republicans, Democrats, say, hey, we got an issue here. Let's sit down together and work it out, rather than go on national television and make a declaration. It is, America is not a dictatorship.
And how do you, people watching this may think, yeah, that sounds great, having everyone come to the table and talk about it. How do you get that to happen, though?
Well, other presidents have done it, both Republicans and Democrats. George W. Bush did, William Jefferson Clinton did, Ronald Reagan did. It's not something that's unusual. In fact, that's really the way you get things done, because when the other party is in the majority, you're going to have to and act in a constitutional fashion.
Yeah, I think it's remarkable how little the president has reached out to Congress in the last 7 years. I think it's unprecedented. It's not that presidents and congressional leaders of opposite parties are necessarily going to agree easily, but if they don't talk to one another, you can guarantee they're not going to agree at all.
Sure. All right, we have just enough time for probably one more question here. You're seeking a 6th term. We have the primary coming up in August. You've already got some competition. Some people saying this could be one of the tightest races that we've seen. Are you preparing for this any differently than you have your previous races, or what's your mindset going into this?
I always prepare the same, and I've been working hard, and I'm confident of victory, but I'm taking nothing for granted. This is a very turbulent political environment, likes of which we haven't seen. I'm confident of what I've done and what I can do, particularly when America is under such threat in my position as Armed Services Committee Chairman and national security. So, but look, anybody who takes anything for granted in this election cycle is using something they're trying to put on the ballot.
I think 2016 is going to be a national security election. There's nobody in the Senate who understands American foreign and defense policy better than Senator McCain. We need strong leaders on that point. There is a new Republican president next year, as I hope. He or she will need people in Congress who can help lead on this question. So I think it's his re-election is one of my highest priorities this year.
All right. Well, thank you so much both for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.